Should I replace my shocks and struts? Well, first off, what are shocks and struts? So, a shock was invented a long time ago as a spring suppressor. So, you got a coil spring or leaf springs, and if you didn't have a shock absorber on your vehicle, then you would just bounce all over the place. I mean, all it does is suppress this spring so that you don't bounce all over the place. So you need the spring in order to not feel every bump in the road. If you didn't have a spring that absorbed the uneven road conditions, then it would just beat you to death pretty much. So then to make it to where the spring isn't just bouncing up and down, then you actually need a shock absorber. So the shock absorber, keeps the spring from going up and down too much. So, and then you've got to, it's sole responsibilities to try and keep the tire in contact with the ground as far as a shock absorber and give you a good ride, obviously. And I mean, there's a lot of responsibilities, but the main one is keeping the tire in contact with the ground. Because if the tire's not in contact with the ground, then you can't turn, you can't stop, you can't do all kinds of stuff. So are shocks and struts important? Yes. So the difference between a shock and a strut is, first off, Mr. McPherson, he decided he was going to take and design a McPherson strut, named it after himself. And a strut basically just took the upper control arm, the ball joint, the shock absorber, the spring, all kinds of stuff, and it put it in a straight spot like this that was taking up all of this space, and now you've got a lot more room for a front wheel drive vehicle. So now you can put the engine and the transmission here instead of going front lengthways, the engine, then the transmission, then the rear end. Now you've got the engine and the transmission and the CV axles that go off to the front vehicle. So front wheel drive, is really, we were able to have front wheel drive vehicles because McPherson Strut designed the struts. Struts actually are the same as shocks, only they do help control the ride height of the vehicle, whereas a shock does not. And a shock does kind of, because if it doesn't protect your springs, then your springs get destroyed, then your ride height goes down. Ride height on your vehicle is critical to alignment. So you're beginning to see that shocks and struts are a very integral part of your vehicle. So, when should you replace them? There's a couple of things that you need to consider. Back in the day, they had, quote, heavy duty. It was air above hydraulic fluid, okay? And the air would mix with the hydraulic fluid, and it's called aeration. As the hydraulic fluid became aerated, then it started out working 100% within a very short time due to aeration. It made it to where your shock just reduced its capacity to work like there's no tomorrow, because air and hydraulic fluid mix together, and there you go. So aeration happened. So that's why they came up with gas. Nitrogen gas does not mix with the hydraulic fluid. So the hydraulic fluid is sitting in there, and it works at 100% of the time. Okay, but now you're actually making your shock or your strut work at 100% of the time. And I have a routine that I would work with my clients. I would ask them, have you ever walked a mile? And of course they have. How long did it take? And some people are like, well, I can do it in 10 minutes. I'm like, well, cool. But they sprint a 4-minute mile. That's the fastest as you can pretty much go. So if you're doing it in 10 minutes, you're honking on down the street. Most people are going to take and walk about 3 miles an hour. So that's, a mile in 20 minutes. So let's just say it takes 20 minutes to walk a mile. So if you close your eyes and I ask you to picture the roads around you. Now, I'm going to block off one of those roads for a mile, and I want you to walk that mile. It takes about 20 minutes. Think about it. A lot of steps. I want you to look at the edges of the road, because that's where the right-hand side of the car is going to be riding, going this way or this way. The right-hand side is going to be on the edge of the road. And I want you to look at all of the potholes and the bumps and the ups and downs and the ins and outs, the cracks in that road as you're walking it. Now it's been 20 minutes. You walked it. Now I'm going to block it's to have that road still blocked off. And I want you to get in the car and I want you to drive it. How many times did your tire go up and down? In other words, your shock or your strut go up and down. So most people say thousands, hundreds, and I want it to be real. So is it fair to say that 20 times, 20 significant up downs happen in a mile, especially when you take into consideration when you turn, that's a significant one. When you go in and out of driveways, super significant. Speed bumps, super significant. Potholes, super significant. There's a lot of, stopping, braking. There's a lot of significant up downs that happen all the time with your vehicle. And of course, the key is we're not supposed to feel it. So we have just 20, in other words, one per minute as you're walking a 20-minute mile, one significant up down per minute. That's all I'm asking. So I'm not trying to say hundreds or anything like that, but just 20. At 75,000 miles, 20 significant up downs per mile means that you've got 1.5 million. 1.5 million significant up downs happened at 75,000 miles. Is it fair to say that no matter how well it's designed, and trust me, there's a couple of main shock and strut manufacturers that sell to the aftermarket and the OEM manufacturers, and original equipment manufacturers mean that that's who builds the cars. So 1.5 million at 75,000 miles. So if you're doing an oil change at 5,000. You're going to do an oil change and rotate at 5,000 miles. At 15,000 miles, you're going to do the 5,000 mile, which is the oil change, rotate, and balance. You're also going to do the air filter, the cabin air filter. You're going to do an alignment, a battery service. And then, at every 5,000 mile interval, it's the 5K. At the 15,000 mile intervals, it's the 15K. So at 15, 30, 45, 60, so on and so forth, on and on and on. And then at 30K, you're going to do the 5K, the 15K equivalents, plus you're going to do the fluid exchanges for like the transmission, the coolant, power steering, if you still have that instead of electric power steering, the brake fluid. You're going to flush the fuel injectors every 15,000 miles as well. So sorry, I forgot that. So when you get that 60,000 miles, you're doing a pretty significant, 30,000, 60,000, 90,000, you're doing significant services on your vehicle. So once a year of a 15K you need to be really aware that that's a critical part. So at 75,000, it's just easy to schedule it as far as replacing the shocks and struts at 75,000 miles along with a 15K. And that way you can budget for it. Budgeting for your automotive repairs is very important. So, I mentioned it a lot in these videos. It's 20 cents a mile on average to maintain and repair your car. Most people drive 15,000 miles a year. So if you're driving 15,000 miles a year or less, then it costs 20 cents a mile. That's $3,000 a year on average. Some years will be less, some years will be more, but on average about $3,000. If you're not budgeting that, if you're not planning for them, then you're going to be caught by surprise all the time. So your shock absorbers definitely suppress the springs. That's what they really do. So they ensure the vehicle stability and control. They provide a comfortable ride. They support the braking. So think about this: at 75,000 miles, your shock or strut that has a minimum of 1.5 million significant up downs. You're driving 75 miles an hour on the freeway. You hit the brakes. Your brand new shocks and struts are definitely going to stop you faster. So back in the day, they literally did tests on some of the original equipment cars versus the aftermarket shocks and struts. And you were stopping 10 feet faster at 60 miles an hour brand new compared to brand new. Now you got 1.5 million significant up downs on your vehicle. How much faster is the brand new one going to stop you now when it was 10 feet when it was brand new versus brand new? You know, you gotta think about your driving conditions, how uneven your roads really are, because that puts a bigger strain on your shocks and struts like there's no tomorrow. You know, if you're frequently hard braking, sharp turning, you know, if you've got any kind of aggressive driving, you know, accelerations, you know, you're putting way more stress. Larger vehicles, you know, trucks, SUVs, they definitely put a bigger demand on the suspension systems. You know, if you've already reached the point where you got excessive bouncing or swaying, you're not. It's not called preventative maintenance anymore. You're not replacing your shocks and struts preventative maintenance wise. You are definitely replacing your shocks and struts because they be worn out, they be broke, they be bad. If you got poor steering response, once again, you waited too long. And again, I mentioned the longer stopping distance, but I mean, really, the only time that this is a big deal is when it's a big deal. So I'm telling you, the don't wait until you know your last thought is going to be, "Wow, I wish I would have replaced my shocks and my struts before you have an accident." And hopefully, you're not hurt. Uneven tire weight. Again, you waited too long. If one of your shocks or struts is leaking, obviously one of the internal seals is compromised and it definitely needs to be replaced. Nose diving when braking. Once again, you waited too long. The key is to replace stuff while it's still good so it stays good. That's called preventative maintenance. So maintaining your shocks and struts at about 75,000 miles, I mean, that's what I'm really going to recommend. Um, Most people are like, you know, if you replace one on one, you know, the right front, you need to replace the left front. I'm saying if you're replacing the right front, you need to replace all four. They all four have the same amount of miles on them. I mean, right? So if you're just going to replace one or you're just going to replace two, why? If you're going to replace your shocks or your struts, you need to do, they all have the same mileage on them. I've never understood, well, maybe I could get more mileage out of this, or maybe I could get more mileage out of that. Well, maybe you can, but do you really want to? Think about it. Shocks and struts are essential for safety, stability, and comfort on the road. You need to prioritize preventative maintenance, and you need to plan to replace the components at around 75,000 miles. You'll be taking an important step to protect both your vehicle and those riding with you. Pay attention to the signs of wear and investing in quality replacement parts. I mean, we have to keep the car going. It's your second largest investment that you've got. So whatever we do, we need, and I'm using the word need, you need to replace your shocks and struts before they're bad. You need to protect your vehicle. You need to protect you. You need to protect other people, not just the ones in the vehicle with you, but those around you. Have a wonderful day. Bring it in. Let us look at your vehicle. Let us check it out. You need to find and build a great relationship with an automotive repair shop that you can trust.